and despite, wearing the flashy mask and stuff like that, I never, like I said, I always wanted to be a base for somebody. I always wanted to make somebody else look good.
Wow, I have quickly morphed into Chris Van Beard. This just started as me not shaving a month ago, and yet here we are. I really enjoyed this conversation with a fellow bearded man, Excalibur. I know you're going to love it as well. It's brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. You might be saying, Chris Van Beard, I've heard so much about Raid. What is it? Well, I describe it as like a dark fantasy RPG. It's available for your mobile device or PC, and the best part about it is the price. It's free $99. Yeah, $0. And I love how it reminds me of like an old school RPG game, but with insanely detailed graphics, as you can see here. Now, if I take you into my champions here, you can see all the different ones I've collected since I started playing last year. And now the highly anticipated Battle Pass is on. Season 1 is live, and you can win some awesome rewards here, including free energy refills, gems, upgraded artifact sets, all kinds of stuff in here just by fulfilling the daily and weekly challenges. And I'll take you into battle here. So bottom right of the main screen there, we'll do a campaign. So you choose the champions that you want and you head into the battle here. You know what, fast forward to the end, because like a Brock Lesnar match, we already know who's gonna win. So boom, there it is, victory! So if you go to the video description, click on the special links. And if you're a new player, you'll get 100,000 silver and this badass champion, Jotun, for free. He kind of looks like he should be like the third member of the Viking Raiders, doesn't he? Your free rewards, they'll be waiting for you in your inbox. It's right up there in the top right for the next 30 days only. A huge thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Now let's get to it, because this interview is unbelievable. I'm sitting with a masked man right now.
And nothing strange about that. Two grown men in a hotel room, one of them wearing a mask.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. We had talked about making an interview, doing an interview for a while, so here we are making it happen.
My pleasure. It's always happy to talk.
And it's great to hear your voice and see you a little bit on Wednesday nights. You're just doing an incredible job on Dynamite.
Thank you. I mean, I would say it's a dream come true, but my father-in-law asked me at Christmas, he said, so is this your dream job? And I said, well, technically no, because I never dreamt that a job like this could exist.
You didn't dream that big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, yes, it is my dream job, but no, it's not, because I would have never dreamt about doing this. Because, for the longest time, it was just WWE or nothing.
Those were really your only options. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been awesome.
So I think for people who might be, just getting familiar with you over the last year or so, you've got to explain your mask.
Well, it may shock people to learn that I used to wrestle professionally.
Right.
I started in Southern California, where there is a big lucha libre tradition, just being north of Mexico, and lucha libre being the Mexican style of professional wrestling. And masks are very prevalent not only in lucha libre, but all facets of Mexican culture. It's part of their cultural mythology, basically. And so I took a shine to lucha for two reasons. One, because growing up I was a big comic book fan, and so there was the superhero-esque aspect of it. And two, I just like the athleticism of lucha and that style of wrestling more than what was kind of happening in like the mid-90s in WWF or WCW at the time. And so that led me down a road where then I discovered the Japanese version of lucha, where all these wrestlers would come over from Japan. They were usually junior heavyweight style wrestlers, and they would come over from Japan, train in Mexico, and then go back to Japan. And they started their own promotion called Universal Pro Wrestling. Gran Hamada was the one that started it, and that promotion had the very early incarnations of the Great Sasuke, Super Delphin, Taka Michinoku, Gedo, Jado, Ultimo Dragon, like all these guys who would go on to be some of the greatest junior heavyweights. And so that, when I saw that, and I was like, oh my God, that's even better than lucha, because it's taking some of the harder hitting aspects of the Japanese style, marrying it with like this athleticism, and that really is like my sweet spot for professional wrestling. So,
Right.
you know, a lot of guys will talk about like, oh, I remember when, you know, Austin and Rock did X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh no, I remember when, you know, they had the most amazing 6-man match at Michinoku Pro. It was a Kai
wow,
versus,
okay.
you know, and like that really is my sweet spot. And so that's, you know, like, because I think people could tell from my commentary that I am a wrestling nerd. Like I internalize all of this stuff. And so that I've always been a nerd in that regard, because I would go out and tape trade and stuff like that in the early days of the internet. On Rexport Pro Wrestling, there was like these tape trading circles, and you know, and so I was always seeking out stuff. There was, when I got my driver's license, I found out there was a Japanese bookstore about 30 miles away from, you know, the house I grew up in, and so every Thursday I would drive to the Japanese bookstore. I would get that week's tape of New Japan Pro Wrestling, bring it home. I would dub it on my 2 VCR. You know, so it's like I was into it.
So was this the mask you were always wearing as a wrestler?
No, I actually my backyard days I had a different gimmick where
I was a backyard wrestler as well.
Yeah. So I was El Scorpio Diablo. It was a different mask, but then when I started training, I'm not sure why I wanted to switch. I think actually I know why I want to switch, because I was in Southern California when I told the native Spanish speakers that I wanted to go as El Scorpio Diablo. They were like, "You're kidding, right?" So then I switched up to Excalibur, but then, you know, switched up the look as well. And so this style of mask has always been, you know, what I've had since 1999.
When you're like, I imagine you don't wear the mask all the time out in public, but if you're like checking into a hotel like we're at here, are there ever fans that are like, I know that voice?
Occasionally, it doesn't happen that often. I think because my speaking voice is a little different than my announcing voice, like just enough that.
I don't know. This is a booming broadcast voice. It is.
But you know, there's been times where I'll meet somebody, you know, like backstage at an AEW show, and I'll be talking to them for about 5 minutes, and that's when it finally clicks. Like if I'm just, you know, in passing, you know, if I'm like, you know, like here's my credit card and driver's license or whatever, you know, that's not enough of a sample size. But once there's a little bit of a conversation going, then people are like, hey, wait a second.
That's what happened the first time I met you. Because I met you like the day before, and then I saw you the next day with your mask on, and I'm like, oh, hey, I'm Chris. Good to meet you. You're like, yeah, we met yesterday. I'm like, I get it now.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's hard too sometimes, because I don't remember that I met you out of the mask or in the mask or whatever, you know. And so it's like, then I'm just like, oh, yeah, remember at the hotel lobby or whatever, and yeah.
So your wrestling career was like 7-ish years, I believe.
Yeah.
So what caused you to go from wrestling into commentary?
Well, it was kind of by necessity, because in 2003, some friends and I, we started a promotion called Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, PWG, and we realized that you know, selling tapes and DVDs at the time was necessary to have the business be, you know, successful. And so I think the first show we released without commentary, but it just kind of felt weird, and so we went back and just recorded our own commentary as myself and Disco Machine, and we just did commentary for the show. And it was very tongue in cheek. It wasn't good. Like if I listened to it today, I would just want to tear my ears off. But that was the roots of it. And you know, throughout the years, you know, we didn't have the budget to bring in anybody to do commentary, and so we just did it. Everything about PWG is, you know, DIY, you know, very bootstrappy, and so, you know, all, you know, from tip to tail was all done internally, including the commentary. And so just throughout the years, and you know, the repetition of doing that allowed me to develop. And then as we started going on for longer, I kind of realized, like, oh, we legit have like the best wrestling in the world. I need to be more serious about my job and commentary to do these guys the the best job possible, because like, if they're going all out in the ring and I'm just sitting here making jokes, like that kind of undercuts the importance of what they're doing. So I started taking it a little more seriously.
Right. And did you have any sort of formal broadcast training or any play-by-play training?
Nope. It was just
Wow. Just listening to the greats.
Yeah, well,
that you're now working with.
so that's the other interesting thing is, of course, I know Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone. I've listened to a lot of their their calls throughout the years. But the broadcasters that really inspire me are actually like basketball or hockey broadcasters, and like there was I grew up in Detroit, and so when I was growing up, the Pistons and the Red Wings were both super hot, and so I was always watching those games, and like George Blaha from the Pistons, and then like now in NBA, Mike Breen is one of my favorite commentators, and just listening to his delivery and then how he's able to call the action, but then tell a story, and and especially in a sport like basketball or something. It's two teams trying to score the most points, but then there's all these little sub stories that he's able to identify, and it's like, oh, last time we were in Denver, this happened. These guys got into a scuffle. We should keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that has been, I think, a little more influential in my style of commentary than Jim Ross or Tony Schiavone. But yeah, I mean, they are legends in this field. So.
But if you grew up watching Japanese wrestling, you're not really able to learn about the commentary because they're speaking Japanese.
Right, and I think that's where kind of the emotion in my voice comes from, because when I would be watching those shows, you're right, I couldn't understand a word, but I could hear they would get excited, and they as the intensity of the match came up, rose, then the intensity of the announcers rose as well.
I want to jump back into the PWG stuff because what you've built there is nothing short of incredible and incredibly impressive as well. At what point along the way did you guys start to realize, oh, we've got something really special here?
I think it was the 2007 Battle of Los Angeles. I might be wrong, it might be 6, but it was the first show where we had Dragon Gate guys come over and compete in the Battle of Los Angeles tournament. And after that happened, there was a couple guys that were on the show, El Generico, Pac, Kevin Steen, that by wrestling with Shima and the Dragon Gate guys, they got invited to go over to Japan to train and work at Dragon Gate. And so then we were like, oh, this is, we never set out with PWG to be the biggest or most financially successful wrestling promotion in the world. We started because we loved wrestling, and we just wanted to put on good, fun shows. And so to see that something that we had built, over 4 years or whatever it was now allowing our, friends and peers in the wrestling world to go on to bigger and better opportunities, then we were like, oh, okay, we've really got something here.
I mean, there's like a real legend attached to PWG. The fact that your tickets sell out very quickly, the fact that you have a very hardcore fan base. Have you ever thought about running bigger venues so more people can come?
So that my involvement with PWG is strictly on kind of, I guess we'll say, like the marketing side.
Okay.
I was a graphic designer by trade, and so all of like the DVD elements or the on-screen elements and stuff like that, I still do that. I still do the DVD covers, but everything else is all Super Dragon, who's my partner in PWG. He's the booker, the live events coordinator. He's everything, and he's got a very strong belief in keeping things small and keeping it special, and and that's much to my frustration. There's been times where I'm like, oh, we could do this type of merchandise, or we could do this kind of shirt or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, nah, it's all right. I'm like, but we're leaving money on the table. He's like, that's fine. And so that's honestly never been a goal of his to run a big arena or to do anything like that. It's just to consistently have the best pro wrestling and to have the best showcase for, because his in-ring career and my in-ring career are, well over with. And so what we are able to do now is create a showcase for the next generation of guys to to really get noticed on a larger stage.
So if you started the commentary out of necessity, was there a necessity to stop wrestling because of that as well?
No, the wrestling I stopped just because the injuries were kind of racking up. I'd had a few concussions, so I was really worried about that. And then the other thing too is just my heart wasn't into it because I was injured. I was less motivated to train or to go to the gym. It just sucks if you're all banged up like that. And so then I started just kind of coasting in between matches, and then I would go out there and I wouldn't have the kind of match that I wanted to have. And I saw all these guys coming up at PWG around that same time who I felt like if I, as one of the co-founders of PWG, wanted a match on the show, I could have that, but I'd be taking a spot away from somebody else. And so I think it was a tough realization to come to, but one that I'm ultimately glad I did come to when I came to it, because you've talked to enough wrestlers, that they're a stubborn bunch, and some go on well longer than they should. And so, I'm still paying the prices from all the stupid decision I made.
What on you right now? Like you go, oh man, I can't believe my neck, knee, elbow, whatever hurts.
It's lower back and knees mostly.
Okay.
It's, I had my meniscus repaired a few years ago, and then almost immediately retore it. And but because then my lower back was banged up, and so that's been an on again off again issue. But then because my meniscus is damaged, I've changed. Like my physical therapist told me, like, oh, you've changed your gait to adapt to how your meniscus is. So now I'm putting more pressure on my left hip, and so now my left hip is getting weird. It's like yeah. So it's like this whole weird thing, and so, I just try to, luckily now I'm able to be a little more mindful of it. I'm able to, to do like the physical therapy exercises and things like that to try to relieve the pressure and stuff like that. But
so we know who Excalibur the commentator is. Who is Excalibur the wrestler?
That's a good question. I wasn't very focused in terms of what my character was or anything like that. Ultimately, I wanted to be a good base for guys. One of my favorite rivalries was Rey Mysterio Jr. and Psychosis, and
wow, yeah.
And Psychosis would always make Rey's stuff look so amazing. So I always liked wrestling, like shorter, athletic guys, and then being able to take their moves really well and really. Really accentuate their athleticism and stuff like that through my bumping or through my taking their moves. And I think that's also kind of, my commentary style too is, yes, I wear the mask, but I don't draw any attention to it. I don't really talk about my career. I'm there to accentuate and to enhance the in-ring product. And
was there ever a point when you were starting to make the full-time transition into just commentary that you went, maybe I don't need the mask?
No, because it's, I said that era of wrestling in the in the 90s in Japan was really my sweet spot,
yeah.
And that's it's the thing I love about wrestling is it's the pageantry, the fantastical element, this. This new cultural mythology that's developed around wrestling. And so, for me, I've been Excalibur my entire career, and just because other people don't know about it, for me, like when I take off the mask, then the wrestling ends. That's a separate thing. That's my my away from wrestling life, my home life or whatever. But when I have the mask on, that's when it's wrestling.
Well, I think the first time that I was introduced to you was All In.
Mm-hmm.
And when they cut to you guys, I went, oh, he has a mask. And he's like really good. And I think that you're right. It makes you stand out. It makes you incredibly unique. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of go, it doesn't matter what it looks like.
You see me 30 seconds a show. What does it matter? Jim Ross wears a big black cowboy hat. Tony Schiavone's got diamond earrings. Like that's what does it matter what we look like? As long as we're doing our job well, then it doesn't matter.
And I think that that's the thing just about broadcasting in general. People don't notice really until you're bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you're really, really good, people just kind of expect it. And then if you're bad, people are like, oh, that's awful. That thing is terrible. So how did All In come about for you?
I had known the Young Bucks for, I guess at that point, about 12, 13 years. And I actually met them, actually no longer than that, because I met them the first time was at Super Dragon, and I and myself were running or like guest teaching a class at Rev Pro, which is Revolution Pro in Southern California, unrelated to Rev Pro UK. But we were at the school and we were running a class, and Matt Jackson came in, and he was Mr. Instant Replay Matt Jackson. He already had his gimmick, and he came in from the his backyard fed, and like he had all his backyard titles and stuff like that, and like the drill was. Like leapfrog, drop down, shoulder tackle, elbow drop or something like that. And he did, leapfrog, drop down, shoulder tackle, standing moonsault press, and this was just like in front of like the class, and myself and Dragon just looked at you like, who is this asshole? And so that was the first time we met him. And then a few years later, they had, they kind of realized like, oh, we can't be doing stuff like that. And they'd kind of tightened up that aspect of their attitude, and they ended up getting booked on PWG. And so I had known them through that, and Matt approached me about doing all in, and he said, you are the soundtrack to our rise in wrestling. And because without PWG, they wouldn't have gotten booked in Dragon Gate. Without getting booked in Dragon Gate, they wouldn't have got booked in Ring of Honor. Without Ring of Honor, they wouldn't have got booked in New Japan. And and so I was there commentating all their PWG matches throughout the years, and and so that was really special for me to be acknowledged. I truly believe they are the best tag team in the world, and so for somebody to get that type of acknowledgement from them was really special. And to have me, to bring me on board for that, we just, before doing this podcast, we did a panel here at C2E2, and Cody, the subject of me being on All In came up, and I told Cody, I said, well, you were out on me, and he's like, I wasn't out, I just wasn't convinced, because he didn't, he was a little weird about the mask, because obviously he's got a traditional wrestling background. He came from WWE, where things are done a certain way, and after he watched the show, he was like, all right, I get it, it's fine.
But the fact that he was willing to give you that chance, though, speaks volumes for your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the faith that the Bucks put in me, and then the fact that they thought, like I said, no professional broadcast experience, but they thought that I could do a good job on cable TV, primetime cable TV. Is just mind-boggling. So the amount of faith that they've put into me, I hope that I've been able to return on my side, with my output, even a tiny iota of that.
So then, what changed for you after All In?
All In was actually the same weekend as my the same weekend as my sister-in-law's wedding. Okay. And so I had to get like a very serious permission slip because it was the weekend, or the wedding was on Sunday, All In was on Saturday, so I missed the rehearsal dinner. I missed it. And I had to tell my my fiance that it's like, hey, I'm never going to have a chance to do something like this. Like this means a lot to me. All these guys are here. I've seen them come up. And she's just like, okay, but if you miss that wedding, I'm going to kill you.
and where was the wedding? California?
It was in San Diego. So I was on a 5 a.m. flight from Chicago to San Diego.
At least you gained 3 or 2 hours when you're going that way.
And so I ended up making it to the wedding in time. I was dog tired, but then when I got there, she was like, you need to keep your energy level up till at least 10 p.m.
Wow.
And
not congratulations on probably the greatest night of your life at that point.
Well, it was her sister's greatest night too. So, she's known her longer than me. So yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, and but I did my part, and I stayed up till 11, and then I just crashed in a heap. But after that, I watched the show back, and I watched it with her, and I was like, wow, I'm really glad I got to do that. And she's like, I'm happy for you. And then maybe a month or so later, Matt was saying, he texted me. He's like, "Hey, there's something coming. And just we'll let you know, but there's something coming." And so she and I talked, and because I had a job away from wrestling, I had a day job and everything, and there was a lot of because the details about AEW at that point, even after it was announced, all we had was the pay-per-view.
That's
the
right.
TV deal and everything.
Yeah,
wasn't
basically
announced.
from January until the pay-per-view was announced.
It was 6 months.
Yeah.
And then the TV deal wasn't even announced till I think right before the pay-per-view.
No, I think it was after that.
Was it?
Yeah.
It was at the upfronts, right?
Yeah.
So that made it in June. Yeah. But anyway, so I was saying to her, can I make a career of this? Like, is this possible? And she's like, I don't know. I mean, like she, it wasn't that she was supportive, but she was trying to be realistic, and I was trying to be realistic too, because there's been so many failed pro wrestling promotions, and
for sure,
and so it's like obviously I knew that to be, have a healthy dose of skepticism, but once I met Tony Khan and talked with him, saw the infrastructure that they had set up from January 1st to May 25th, and all of this stuff, and all these people that were taking a chance on AEW, both she and I agreed that this was something that that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I couldn't pass it up.
So what was the plan? If AEW hadn't happened, what course were you on?
Just keep my day job, and keep doing PWG, and I think I would have been happy with that.
Sure.
I would have. Had I said no to AEW and AEW gone on to to what it is today, and I had turned it down, I would be miserable. But had AEW never even been an option, I think I would have been fine, because I never had any expectations of about my involvement with wrestling beyond just PWG and beyond being a place where guys could apply their sharpen their instruments and get ready for the next stage, whether it was Japan or WWE or wherever.
When you found out that Jim Ross was getting hired on, what was your reaction?
There's absolutely no way they're going to let me sit next to Jim Ross.
Were you like, I'm out of a job now?
No, but I just thought, like, there's no way Jim is going to be able to sit next to a guy in a mask. And and then the first time we met, they flew us to Atlanta a couple weeks before Double or Nothing to do kind of some chemistry tests, and the first time we met, I knew that already he was very skeptical of me and my abilities, and he said, the important thing here is to get over the boys in the ring, not yourself. And I said, thank you, sir. I know that, and that's I hope you. And after that weekend, he was, I think, a little more at ease. And then after Double or Nothing, he was like, okay, yeah, like, you are focused exclusively on getting the in-ring product over. And so I was very, very happy about that, to get his kind of seal of approval.
And then Tony Schiavone gets added on a few months later. What were your feelings about that?
I was awesome, because I was always more of a WCW guy during the Monday Night Wars than a WWF guy. And I would watch both, but I always look forward to WCW more, just because they had the cruiserweights, the lucha guys, the Japanese guys, and so that I wouldn't have to get a fourth generation VHS tape to see that. And so I always heard Tony a little more than I heard JR, and so that was cool, because I really I really liked Tony as a fan. And then getting to meet him as a person, he's just like the absolute coolest guy.
He's so nice too. Yeah. Like one of the nicest people I've ever met in wrestling.
Yeah, and the great thing about Tony is he thought his wrestling career was over. He thought he was never gonna really do anything again. He was happy doing University of Georgia sports, doing minor league baseball, and that's a cool thing to be able to do. Not many people get to do that.
Yeah.
And so now that he gets this kind of second act in wrestling, he is just, he's beyond thrilled, because he also, after WCW, he did step away from wrestling and he really hadn't watched. And so now all this stuff that he's seeing is new. And so when you hear him and he reacts surprised or shocked at something, That's authentic. That's not like a manufactured thing. He's just like, oh my God, I've never seen that before.
Those are two pretty good guys to sit under the learning tree of.
Yes, and I am so thankful for that.
What's the biggest thing you've learned from Jim Ross?
The economy of words. Being concise and now that I'm not, now that I have to think about it and say it, I'm not being concise at all. But
It's ironic.
yes, but it just because for PWG I was used to either calling it all by myself or only having a 2-man booth, and in AEW with the 3-man booth we have to share the ball a lot. And so if I do have a point that I'm trying to make, making it quickly and concisely, not only is a better messaging tool for the audience and getting them to understand what I'm trying to say, but it also creates an opportunity for a conversation to happen between the broadcasters where Tony or JR can expound upon it, and and then it really adds emphasis to it versus me just saying this is this way because of this.
Yeah.
It creates a conversation, and it raises the importance of it.
Now, is there something specific you learned as well from Tony?
I think the part of my job that I'm the worst at is being a pitch man. And, saying it's like, oh, tickets will be on sale for Denver, blah, blah, blah. Tony can do those in his sleep. He is so great at that. And so I'm always looking I'm listening to him and listening to how he transitions into it, like the openings that he looks for, or if he's got a specific segue or something, and so that's something that I'm very happy that, and they both have two completely different styles, and so being able to learn from these guys that are legends in their industry, but then have two distinct styles of broadcasting has been so great.
And there's not really a play-by-play guy or a color guy or a third guy. You guys kind of all just come together, and what comes out always sounds great.
Thank you. I mean, at first we were kind of, in that first chemistry test with JR, we were kind of trying to determine the roles because it was myself, Jim, and Alex Marvez. And Alex has since moved into more of a backstage role, interviewer role. But, Jim was saying, it's like, well, I'll handle the play-by-play. You can be analysis, Alex can be, statistics. And that was kind of the original way we started it out. But then I think once Jim realized how familiar I was with like the Bucks, the Lucha Bros, and all these teams, he realized that there was not no way that he could catch up with that level of knowledge, but he already had somebody here that knew that.
Yeah.
So why not rely on me? And so yes, for like those type of matches, I will be, I'll be play-by-play. And for a more traditional style of a match like Cody versus Dustin Rhodes, Jim Ross will take the reins on that. And it's not something that we ever say like, okay, you're doing this, I'm doing that. It just kind of happens naturally.
That's the best way for it to work. Mm-hmm. And now you've got Taz in the mix.
Yeah.
So this is from a viewer speaking here, from the outside looking in for me. Is Taz coming in when Tony Schiavone is doing something in the ring?
Originally, Taz was coming in as kind of Tony's backup because he still had University of Georgia commitments.
Yeah.
And so Tony couldn't be at TV every week. So that's what Taz was kind of brought in for on a case-by-case basis. But everybody loved having Taz backstage, and, the network loved Taz. And so, now he's kind of, this past week of Dynamite in Kansas City, Tony had so many hosting responsibilities on the show that it just made sense to have Taz out there instead of Tony getting up every second match or
Right.
doing that. And so it's great that we have kind of a relief valve too, in Taz if JR gets stranded and wherever I'm stuck somewhere, we can have a 3-man team out there, and a really good 3-man team.
Well, I think people don't realize from a production standpoint, there's more than just you guys calling what you see on the monitor. Mm. I don't think that fans realize that you have to pitch to these tickets are on sale, or we're going to throw to this package that sets up this match and all that type of stuff. So walk me through, like, Dynamite ends Wednesday night. Then what's the rest of your week look like leading up to the next Dynamite?
So not only am I, I have my on-screen announcer role, but I'm also a marketing manager with AEW. And so I'm working behind the scenes with Dana Massey, our CMO, and she and I kind of work together on just basically anything that's marketing related. Whether like Jeff Jones, it handles a lot of our handles all of our social media and our kind of digital stuff. But whether it's like a printed thing, a banner, marketing elements, advertisements, billboards, whatever that is, Dana and I work that. We kind of we've developed like the brand identity and things, and these are all things that I've done in my away from wrestling career.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's been actually really cool because that's something I do enjoy working on, and then to be able to have that aspect of it along with the the on-screen aspect is really cool. I mean, those are like two of my biggest passions. And so after TV, fly home, catch up on the emails. We'll kind of chat with the Turner guys. What are they thinking about next week? What are their big marketing activations? And then weekends are usually thankfully pretty quiet. And then Monday we have conference calls with the Turner team, our internal team, about the next week's priorities. And then Tuesday morning flying out to Dynamite, and then Tuesday night production meeting, Wednesday, show day, Thursday fly home, catch up with Dana, emails,
rinse, lather, repeat.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear the Turner people are that involved with what's going on.
They've been a fantastic partner with us because, at first we were kind of skeptical. We didn't know what to expect, but the team at Turner has given us their full-throated support. They have dedicated so many unexpected resources to us, and they're just as invested as the internal AEW team is in our success, and that's really awesome. Like here at C2E2, we have AEW, we have our own booth presence, but Turner, in order to promote Dynamite, had made a big marketing spend on everybody gets like a AEW drawstring bag, and there's like free posters and all this stuff.
Wow.
And that's separate from our company. That's all done by Turner, and so they are super involved in promoting the show.
Well, they should be. I mean, they're probably pretty happy to have such a popular show on TNT. But in terms of the actual like work that you do that we hear on the air on a Wednesday night, what all goes into that?
I have my own, kind of way of writing up my notes and stuff like that. Like, after the production meetings, Alex Marvez will actually kind of write up some bullet points about, statistics and these sort of things. And I like to let JR and Tony have those, and then I write up my own notes, because if we're all reading from the same thing, then it could kind of sound a little redundant or something like that. So I try to look for different different angles of storytelling than the other guys might. And so yeah, I mean, I watch back the shows. I've got my own notes, like almost kind of like a diary of things that had happened. Like for Cody and MJF, like as it's happening, if I have certain thoughts, I'll write that up, and then I have like a Google Doc that I could just refer to, that said week whatever in Huntsville, like this happened, and blah blah blah, and like so then I'm able to take that chunk out, put it into my show notes for that day, and that sort of thing.
Now, people that are watching overseas, they get like a different feed, right? So when it goes to commercial, they still hear your commentary, right?
Yes, yeah. They the Fight TV feed is uncut for 2 straight hours, and
that's got to be difficult, because that's usually the point. And I speak from experience in television. During commercial breaks is when you get to talk to producers, figure things out. Did that go well? Let's try this. If people are able to listen in on this, how do you get that stuff accomplished?
It's tough because, well, so all my broadcast experiences have been up till Dynamite had been on a pay-per-view, and pay-per-view is just 4 straight hours.
That's true, yeah.
And for PWG shows, there's no producer or anything. It's just me, talking into the box, and there's 4 straight hours of that, and so like I've always kind of worked in that way, but JR and Tony are used to TV wrestling, used to commercial breaks and stuff like that. And so there's what we'll end up doing is we have a talkback button where we can talk back to the truck. And so if I have to relay something to Tony and we can't do it in commercial break, I'll relay it to the truck. Then they'll put it back out to Tony or to Jim or whoever. And that's kind of how we get around.
Oh, and the
that
talkback button doesn't go over the air.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
and so we're talking directly to the producer. Yeah.
Right. Do you have a favorite call? I mean, it's only been, not even a year, but do you have a favorite call so far of yours?
I like when the best friends do the hug. I just said it. You got to give the people what they want, because every time they do it, they do the big Okada zoom out, and it's way more dramatic than it should be.
Which is amazing,
right? And so I said that just like as a joke one time when they did it, and because it is so absurd that they're doing the zoom out on this hug, and then so now it's just become like one of my calls. And then JR's favorite call of mine is Tope Suicida, and. And so, like, when a guy does a dive, he'll literally, like, turn to me and be like,
When you're done calling the show, because it's not just Dynamite, it's obviously dark as well, what's your voice sound like?
It's pretty good. I think as time goes on, I'll probably have to do some, vocal training or, like what singers or anything like that does. But, now because I'm only calling one show a week, or in cases like this with the pay-per-view, 2 in a week, I've got enough downtime in between that it's not,
to rest it.
Yeah. And like I've done PWG shows like Battle of Los Angeles where it's 3 straight days and I'm doing it solo, and it amounts to being like 13 straight hours, or 13 hours and 3 days of wrestling that I'm calling. Yeah. And by the end of that, like I'm totally fried. And so to have, to just do 3 hours on a Wednesday night with Dynamite and Dark, it may be a little scratchy afterwards, but by Thursday night, by 24 hours later, I'm back to normal.
Well, when I did the interview with Justin Roberts, he talked about there was a point in his WWE career that he almost lost his voice, like completely.
Yeah.
And I get it. He's very, very boisterous with his voice, but you are too, with your style.
And I think it's not only is the AEW schedule helpful to the in-ring wrestlers, it's helpful to everybody that's involved in the show, because Justin doesn't have to hit the jam, like he doesn't have to hit that every single night after night after night. He has to hit that once a week, and so it's helpful in that regard, and it gives longevity to everybody, and I mean including like the production team, they, instead of striking the stage and getting it out to the next day to the next town and putting it up and having to do that, work this breakneck schedule, they can strike the stage, get it to the next town, and then leave it in the next town, fly home, fly back, get the stage up, so it's a much easier schedule on everybody.
You must have so many frequent flyer miles already.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
What's your airline now?
I'm a Delta guy.
Okay.
And
the Diamond Medallions, what you're trying to get to?
I just missed Diamond last year, and so
that's a lot of flying.
Yeah, and I'll have Diamond probably by April this year.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, that's 100,000 miles.
I think it's 150. Or maybe 125, but I mean it's all the west to east flights.
Yeah, of course.
It's every like a lot of the guys are based northeast or Atlanta, Orlando, that kind of area. So it's like if we're doing Nashville or whatever, that's hour and a half, 2 hour flight for them. For me, that's that's a 4.5, and then sometimes a lot of times with layovers or something.
And time changes. That's another thing.
And that's why I'm always on the 6 a.m. Tuesday morning flight. That's
you on the same flight as the Young Bucks all the time?
No, they're flying out of Ontario.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Orange County, is it?
Yeah. No, Ontario is like Riverside. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so yeah, it's a pretty small regional airport, but the good thing is, because they are EVPs, they can say, fly me out of this airport, and everybody's like, okay, cool, yeah, no problem.
In doing the research for this interview and even finding out about you after All In, there's not a lot of information about you out there. I mean, if you really, really dig,
right.
But is that something that you like? Like, obviously, you're wearing a mask. You're a man of mystery, in a certain way. Is that how you like to keep things.
I mean, I do enjoy my privacy. I do like being able to walk through the airport or, walk through the convention center here and nobody really knowing who I am. And because, I mean, despite being involved in professional wrestling and despite, wearing the flashy mask and stuff like that, I never, like I said, I always wanted to be a base for somebody. I always want to make somebody else look good. And so I've never really set out to be a star. And I'm happy with that. Like it would be very easy for me to just all of a sudden take off the mask and be like, this is me. Now everybody noticed me. But it's like, it's cool when, people recognize me or find out who I am and they smile and stuff like that. And that's a cool feeling. But, that's not really what it's about for me. It's not to say that everybody that's on screen is self-serving or something.
Well, that's
like
kind
that.
of how wrestling is, though.
Yeah,
you know, in wrestling, people are trying to put themselves over. That's very much how it is.
My job, I 100% believe my job is to put over the in-ring product.
But and that's a rare place to be coming from. I think that a lot of people go, I'm on camera, I'm now.
Well, I mean, you're Canadian and I'm from Detroit, which is just right across the river from Windsor. I think there's something about that Midwest, good hard work will be eventually rewarded work ethic, and I that's something that I still believe is just like, I don't need a pat on the back. I don't need to sign the biggest contract today, but if I do a good job and everybody likes my work, both the fans and the office and the Turner people, then I think one day I'll be rewarded however it may be monetarily or otherwise.
Was there any discussion years ago about an audition or tryout with WWE?
No, I've heard a couple rumblings that it's like, they asked to pull a tape together for you, but I've never been contacted or anything about that. And I think a large part of it is my style in PWG is not the WWE style at all.
Right.
And that's not to say that like Mauro Ranallo doesn't have a WWE style typically, but
True.
He works in that system. He's able to work, and so that's not to say that would be the one excluding factor. But I think there was a number of things that just didn't line up, and so
your style is actually kind of similar to Mauro's. It's excited, which I think we're all excited watching wrestling.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you be excited?
Right, and I think the tough part that with both Mauro and my style is that if something isn't going well, or if something kind of lands with a thud, then you can't oversell it, because then people think you're disingenuous, and then they don't believe you. And so that's been kind of a learning curve for me, and something that I've kind of learned a little bit from Mauro and listening to him as well, is that you have to be truthful, you have to be authentic to your audience.
Have there been other people along the way, now that you have this job, that have either asked for advice or that you've now gotten advice from?
No, so a lot of wrestlers, because they know I'm watching the whole show, will ask like, oh, what did you think of my match? Did you see this? How did this look? And things like that. And I haven't really, spoken to any broadcasters about, imparting advice or anything like that. But, on the indies, or, everybody I think is very supportive, and Ian Riccaboni and I have had conversations. Lenny Leonard and I have had conversations. We're all very supportive and very happy for each other. And I think there's like a lot of camaraderie in that world that may not necessarily exist in WWE.
Sure. You mentioned your fiance earlier. Is she a wrestling fan?
No.
So how did you explain this to her?
Well, so I think it was on our second date. I was like, hey, I've got something to tell you.
Oh no.
And she's an attorney, and she's like, oh yeah, I have the LexisNexis database. I already looked you up, and and it's like, I know, like nothing you're telling me is a surprise. But then kind of introducing her to the world of wrestling, and and by that point, in my fandom of wrestling, I wasn't really watching it for enjoyment. It was just more to like prep for PWG and stuff like that. And so, and she didn't care. Like her only experience with wrestling was that. When she was in high school, all the boys in her class would do, DX, and so that's, she didn't really have an opinion outside of that. And so when she saw how passionate and how much I enjoyed it and how big of a part of my life it was, that she was fine with it.
I don't think with wrestling you can really be 1 foot in. Right? Bless you.
Thank you.
And if you were just watching it before to kind of prep for PWG, you probably weren't all in with it. You were maybe all in with PWG, but you weren't all in with wrestling. Pardon all the puns about all in. But, did that obviously change for you about a year ago?
A little bit before that, I started watching a little bit more New Japan and stuff like that, just for enjoyment's sake, and because I think, like with New Japan World, it became a lot easier. I didn't have to do a lot of legwork for it, and at the time, I had my day job, my recreational hours were kind of limited, and so I don't want to have to search for content and do that sort of stuff. If I can just pay $10 a month and just get all this stuff, it was a lot easier. And so then that led to me watching a little bit more wrestling, and then just going down rabbit holes, like when, before, I guess 5-6 years ago for PWG, I would just kind of watch whoever was right in front of me, whoever's going to be on the show that night or whatever, that week. But then I think as wrestling Twitter has kind of grown, I would see like GIFs and I'd be like, oh, this guy looks pretty good. And then I'd go down a rabbit hole looking at their matches. They were not necessarily booked on PWG, but just kind of general awareness.
Do you have any advice for someone who might be watching this that wants to be in the position that you're in now?
Well, I hope you don't want to be in my position, because I have no intentions of relinquishing this. But
I will die in that chair.
No, I think the advice would just be don't give up, but not in a like, oh, you have to be relentless way, but just don't let your discouragement, or if things aren't going well, don't let that be the kind of death knell on your dream. It's like I said, I never expected this to be possible. This, there was some sort of cosmic confluence of events that allowed, Tony Khan, the Young Bucks, Cody, and Kenny Omega to come together and start this wrestling company. And, if that can happen, like anything can happen. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so crazy that we're sitting here 24 hours before our pay-per-view in Chicago, and that's just wild. This shouldn't exist. And so if this can happen, then anything can happen.
And yet it does exist.
Yeah.
And every time you walk into one of those arenas, is it still just like an overwhelming feeling of gratitude for you?
Yes. It's cool, and like I'm less nervous now that we've been doing this for 21 weeks or whatever it is, but I'm still just like, there's still a part of me that is the wrestling fan that, when I hear JR welcome us to this show, hello everybody, and like, still kind of gives me goosebumps, and and I hope that never goes away, because this is a dream job, and so we're trying to do. I say we, and I mean everybody in the company is trying to do everything that we can to make this successful for as long as we can, and to keep the camaraderie and the culture that we have backstage like it is, and not turn it into a lot of backbiting or like that sort of stuff. And I mean that will happen eventually, but I think it's important that we kind of keep that supportive attitude of everybody.
Since it's been 21 weeks, like you said, what have been the biggest changes since week 1 and 2 and 3 to where you guys are at now?
Definitely the tightening up of the show, on the format, the actual run of the show.
I noticed JR doesn't throw to break. He goes, we'll continue in picture. And from a production decision, I'm like, that's very smart.
That is, and it's something that, JR throwing to break is an art.
Yes.
And JR has it down to a science. And if if we're getting counted down in our ear that we've got 8 seconds to break, JR has an 8-second version of it. He's got a 7, a 6, a 5, a 4,
Wow.
He's got it. He's got him chambered, and he can pull him out at any time he needs to. And so, because he's got these standbys, it was a little tough to get him to change it up. And so now he has to, instead of saying we'll be right back or don't go anywhere, or whatever, he has to throw in that picture-in-picture thing.
But not every break is picture-in-picture.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But we're getting the heads up in our ear that this is a picture-in-picture, this is a full break, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And so it's there's been changes in that regard, and just the overall. From a production standpoint, there's been a lot of experimentation with like different camera angles and things like that. Like there was a couple shows where we had like the sky cam that was on the wire, and that provides like a really cool angle, but not every building is set up, where they have the trusses in the right place to do that. And so, it was something that I think the production crew really liked, but from a from a logistical standpoint, didn't always work, and so they abandoned that in favor of other angles and things like that. And so there was experimentation. There will continue to be experimentation, but I think now that we've gotten 20 plus shows under our belt of weekly television, we know now what the AEW formula is, and now we can experiment a little more safely with, knowing that, okay, if this doesn't work, we can fall back on this.
And I'm sure that if we had the same conversation a year from now and 2 years now and 3 years from now, the product's going to continue to evolve.
Yes.
And continue to get tighter and better.
Yeah. It always will. That's the whole thing about, almost anything is, once you become complacent, people realize that, and then they stop being interested.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the high angle camera, I'm glad you had one when Cody did his moonsault off the cage.
I can take absolutely no credit for that. Well, I was really happy we had that too.
That was a pretty insane spot.
Yes. Cody mentioned that he was like when his form was basically like when on the Muppets when Kermit would get thrown across the room. He was just like it was like a total rag doll.
But it worked. It was effective.
It did. It was great, and it was one of the thing is AEW has only existed for 14 months at this point, and if you want to call Double or Nothing the actual starting point, less than a year right now.
Yeah.
And in that time, we've had already so many iconic moments.
Well, and you've got to realize, being on the inside of this, how much AEW has changed the landscape of pro wrestling in that short time. Like last January, people were like, this is amazing, there's finally competition. And not even a second of a single match had even occurred.
Right.
And here we are, a year and a bit later. Are you able to feel that? Is it palpable?
Oh yeah, definitely. Just from the level of not only fan interest, but wrestler interest, and not just guys that are on the indies looking for a break, or guys that are in WWE that are looking for alternative or looking to leverage us for contractual things. It's just I think it's sparked a lot of people. It's brought the fan back to these kind of wrestlers that might have been jaded, and it's brought the fan back to these lapsed fans that have been out on wrestling, or just might have watched it, still were kind of interested, but it wasn't that big part of their routine, but they now have kids and stuff like that, and that's been actually one of the coolest things, is talking to people that are around my age, but now they have 10, 11, 12-year-old kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And those kids are watching it, and those kids are painting their face like Darby Allin, or they're like doing that sort of stuff, and that's super cool.
Look, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And man, congratulations to you.
Thank you, man.
On everything.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And like I said, without AEW, we wouldn't even be sitting here. So I'm extremely.
I don't know. I'm moving to LA soon, so I'll be at PWG shows.
We'll get some fish tacos. We'll do
that. Can we?
Yeah.
No, but I'm so stoked to see what's been going on with AEW, and it's your voice along with JR and Tony Schiavone's that's kind of leading us on this path.
That's so wild. Still pinching myself over that.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, man.
Appreciate you. Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed this chat with Excalibur and my beard. Although people with actual beards that are watching this are going, really, man? That thing? And you're right. This has just been me not shaving for 29 days. And I think we're going to take this to the full 30 days and then go back to Chris Van clean shaven, or at least Chris Van scruff. So follow me on Instagram at Chris Van Vliet. I will document what this ends up turning into, because guys, you know, when you have a full beard, then you got to trim it down to like the goatee, then maybe just the mustache, maybe the little soul. I don't know. I hope you were able to pull a couple of nuggets out of this conversation. Apparently this is what pulling nuggets looks like out of this conversation with Excalibur. So the next time you hear his voice on Dynamite or a pay-per-view, you'll go, now I understand why he says it that way or why he does it that way. And I was really fascinated by his inspirations, because a lot of people that are around our age, and we're about the same age, are highly inspired by the Attitude Era. Like it's Rock Austin or it's Austin McMahon, or maybe you were really inspired by Nitro. But to hear that Excalibur loved watching Japanese wrestling, I think explains a lot. That stacked on top of the fact that he was a wrestler and one of the founding members of PWG gives you the Excalibur that you hear each and every week. And how awesome is it that he gets to work with legends like Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone on commentary every single week. Wow, hope you enjoyed this one. Big thank you again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and we'll see you next time. Will I have a beard or not?